we want to install WeBWorK. You've got sort of the basic outline of what WeBWorK's doing here, this diagram, and we've got a lot of stuff we need to do, some of it in order, some of it doesn't have to be in as strict a order. We're going to have to set up the user and the directory structure, we're going to have to get files, then we need to install all the prerequisite software and set all that stuff up. And after we've got everything, all the files we need, all the bits we need in the right place, we need to configure everything, setting permissions, setting configuration files, and that kind of stuff. And then we need to actually, once it's configured, run one more sort of set of updates and installations and things to get the courses actually built and ready to run. And then we finalize and test our installation, and with any luck, we'll have a working system. So let's dive right in. I've logged into my system here. You can see that I've got some system information, memory usage, all this stuff. I've got a sort of standard Ubuntu Apache Cloud setup. Something you're going to want to do, especially if you're sysadminning your own stuff, is make sure you keep your system up to date. This is where package managers are useful. If you have experienced them, you know how great they are. If not, I have a bunch of packages installed in this machine. I'd like to make sure they're up to date and they all have their security and, you know, patches and all of that stuff installed. And rather than doing it yourself or anything like that, you just do sudo apt-get update, and that will fetch sort of the list of packages from the main servers, and then sudo apt-get upgrade will install them. Although you'll notice some of these have been held back. That's because they're new packages. We would need to do sudo apt-get dist upgrade to install those. Although if I installed them, because it's the Linux headers and the kernel, I should probably restart, and I don't want to do that because it'll take time. So I'm going to forego updating those, but they really should be updated on a production machine. I can't clear after every turn. I'm not going to remember it. So we've got our system. It's more or less up to date. So let's prepare it for WeBWorK. The first thing to do is add the user that is going to administer the system. So this will be sudo add user www.admin. I'm not going to worry about giving him actual information. You don't have to do this step. You can use a different user. You can have this user be created when you installed your system. Sometimes you want to make an extra user so that you can have shared administration. This is the user we're going to be doing, and I'm mostly doing it to show off some various stuff. We're also going to make a group. So we talked a little bit about groups on session 0. We'll discuss the file permissions more, but the short answer is we want some files to be readable only by the person who's administering, or writable only by the person who's administering WeBWorK, and then we want some files to be writable by the web server, and we don't want all files to be writable by the web server. And so this WW data group is going to be sort of our way around that. Things that we want to be writable by both the administrator and the web server at the same time will have to be owned by this extra data group we've created. So I want to add myself to the data group. And when we get to installing the Apache server, I will add the Apache server user to the data group, and then that data group will sort of be a stand-in for both of us together. The www admin user does not have to be a sudoer, but then you have to switch out to another sudoer user whenever you need to install something or restart the web server or do any number of things. And so it's useful if it is a sudoer. So in a Debian or Ubuntu kind of system, you do that by adding them to the sudo group. Something to keep in mind, I'm working on an apt or Ubuntu. I'm working on Ubuntu specifically, but I'm working on sort of a Debian apt system. Some of these commands will be different for a Fedora or Red Hat kind of system. In particular, the sudo group is called the wheel group, and instead of apt, you're using yum or whatever new version of yum they've got going nowadays. The ideas are the same, but there are some pretty big differences in terms of what commands you're actually using. So we'll be happy to help you out with that, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm doing Ubuntu. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to my WWAdmin user. From now on, I'm actually that user. This is going to be basically the same thing as if I'd actually logged in as that user. So you can see my new username here. Now we want to get the actual WeBWorK files. We all had a nice tour of GitHub the other early session, so we're just going to do basically the same thing we did in the early session to actually get the WeBWorK program files. Unfortunately, if I type git, I don't have git. So as my machine's telling me, I can install it by doing apt-get install git. This is how we're going to get as much of our software as possible because of the automatic update stuff. You'd have to use yum in order to install git on a different machine. We also want to install WeBWorK. We have to build the directory structures. So WeBWorK is generally kept in opt, which is a little used directory nowadays in Linux-y type of systems, but that's where WeBWorK is traditionally kept. And while in theory you can put it anywhere you want, you're likely to find a bug or two if you don't do something semi-standard. So we do opt. Now opt is, if we look at all of these files, owned by root, so I can't just make something in opt. So I'm going to have to do sudo make directory WeBWorK. But on the other hand, I need WeBWorK to be owned by the WeBWorK admin user, so I'm going to change ownership from WeBWorK to WWAdmin. And I'm also going to change the group. Now WeBWorK, the folder is owned by the web user, which means that I can do stuff. I can create a file, and I don't have to worry about sudoing all the time. Okay, so now we start propagating this stuff, filling up with stuff. For example, we're going to need the WeBWorK 2 files. These are the files that run the actual sort of learning management system of everything. So git clone, HTTP. This is exactly the same setup that we were looking at earlier this morning. So you've got this cloning into this directory. We could clone into someone else's personal repo, but you're not really going to do that. And we just have to wait a little bit. No, that is the name of the user that's administrating WeBWorK. Oh, the WeBWorK folder? Yeah, that is also the WWAdmin group. And in general, things should not be in the WW data group. If it's in the WW data group, we're going to set it up so that it's writable by the web server. And in general, the web server should only be able to write things that you feel comfortable with it writing. The web server is not a trusted user. It's acting on behalf of whoever is on the other end of the computer, and so you shouldn't let it access things that it doesn't need to access. In particular, WeBWorK is not owned by, or not writable by the web server user, or is not part of WW data. All right, we also need PG. This is the problem generation and problem grading side of WeBWorK. So now you can see I've got WeBWorK and PG in this folder. I need some other stuff, so we need a libraries folder. Traditionally, WeBWorK, back in its day, was meant to have lots of different libraries from different kinds of subjects. Nowadays, it really only has the main WeBWorK Open Problem Library, but it still has the same folder structure from before. So you've got a libraries folder, and then inside the libraries folder, we are going to clone the Open WeBWorK, or the Open Problem Library. So github.com, Open WeBWorK, Open Problem, WeBWorK-Open Problem Library.git. With any luck, I will have stuff. This one's going to take a little bit longer because we've got some 30,000 problems, and it's a bunch. And so there we are. If we go into the WeBWorK Open Problem Library, we will see the actual Open Problem Library, its ancillary directories, all of that good stuff. Moving on down the list in no particular order, we also need MathJax. MathJax used to be optional. It is not optional anymore. It's used by too much stuff. So this is the JavaScript-based math rendering tool that we use, and we also get it from GitHub. Notice we're not getting it from the Open WeBWorK GitHub repository. We're getting it from the MathJax repository because it is maintained by someone else. So now we've got the libraries, MathJax, PG, and WeBWorK 2, and the last thing we need is courses. And that is empty for now. We will need to put stuff in it eventually, but it is just part of the general directory structure. And so that's it. That's what WeBWorK is going to look like once we're finally done installing everything. We've set up a framework for it. Now we need to actually get all of the ancillary software that's associated with WeBWorK. The two big ones are going to be the WeBWorK server, or the Apache server, and the MySQL server. So for example, in order to install the Apache server, you're going to do apt-get install Apache 2. Now, Apache had a fork a while back, and we use this pre-fork version of Apache 2. This will be a little bit different on a Yum or CentOS type machine because Apache 2 is generally referred to as HTTPD there, and the package structure is slightly different. It's going to get us a bunch of good stuff, which we will install. So the web server is running now. If I go to, I have to remember this real quick. I have to figure out what my public address is for this server. There we go. This is the server that I just installed WeBWorK on, or the Apache server on. You can see that it's here. We also need MySQL. This might be a different flavor of MySQL. It might be MariaDB or something similar. It's going to ask us for a root password. Something to keep in mind is MySQL has a completely different user structure than comes with your base Linux system. So we've got a root for our Linux system. We've also got a root for our MySQL server. We've got a WeBWorK user for our Linux system, and we're going to have another user, which is a specific MySQL user for WeBWorK, so that WeBWorK can actually write and do stuff with the database. And we keep going. If you go to the notes, you will notice that there are a lot of packages we need for WeBWorK. That's just the list that you'd use on a Debian-based system, the list of packages, and it's going to be slightly different for a Yum-based system. And we need to install all of them. We've picked up a lot of different dependencies over the years. I've already done that, so we're going to skip this part because that'd be super boring. But just assume that I have run apt-get install on every single one of those things. As an aside, if you're using CentOS or Red Hat, you're actually going to add some additional repositories to get all of these packages. You need the enterprise repositories, the EPEL repositories, to get all these things. Now, in an ideal world, we get all our software either from Git or from the package repositories. Unfortunately, it's not ideal, and there are certain Perl modules we need that don't really have good packages in the package repository, and we can get those using CPAN, which is a Perl-specific CPAN package manager. CPAN is nice because it's uniform. It's basically the same on all different machines, but it is also a little bit less fully featured. You can't uninstall stuff with CPAN. CPAN doesn't do automatic updates of things. It's a little bit less fully featured. In order to install something with CPAN, we would do sudo cpan and then the name of the Perl package. So, for example, one of the Perl packages we need is iterator. The first time you run it, it's going to ask if you want to configure stuff. It's reasonably good about configuring itself, so you can just type yes for both of those. In general, if you can install something from a package repository, it's better than installing it from CPAN, although there definitely are things that you have to install from CPAN. So CPAN is going to get iterator and compile it, and boom, we're done. The list of Perl packages, again, varies depending on what your distribution is and what's in the package repository, and it might even be different now, but this is what we use for the Debian system now. All right, so now we're going to start configuring things now that I've got everything installed. We've assumed that I've spent the last however many minutes installing stuff. The first thing we're going to do is add the WeBWorK user to the group we made. The WeBWorK user varies depending on what your system you're in. So if I go to etch Apache 2, this would probably be etch HTTPD on a different system, and I look at the apache2.conf file. Oop, I probably need to do more. So you can see here it says user group, and it's got some variables, and it says these need to be set in Apache 2 envars. So this is just me sort of digging through the comp files to figure out where the stuff is that I need. So I actually need to be looking in envars. And one of the things we see is that the Apache run user and the Apache run group are www data. And so that's the user that I want to add to the www data group. Now that group contains both the web server user and me. Let's see, we also have some specific Perl or Apache modules we need to enable. We need to make sure that the npm event module is not on, and we need to make sure that the npm prefork module is enabled. That would be dismod for disable module and nmod for enable module. We just need to make sure that there isn't any conflicts with any of the other, incompatible npm modules. We also need the Perl module, mod Perl. This is the link between Apache, the web server, and Perl, the sort of main programming language. So we're going to enable mod Perl and the module aprec2. Again, you don't need to necessarily remember all of these things that I'm enabling. Just know that we installed Apache and then we enabled all the stuff that Apache needs to do its thing. In fact, there's even further stuff I could do if we wanted to run WeBWorK 3. There's another couple modules that I have to enable that I'm not going to do right now. Technically, I should restart the server, but since we're not doing anything with it, I'm not going to worry about it. We have to also edit some various config files. So the three things that we have to change are the timeout. 300 is too small. We generally increase it, and the reason is because you're not going to be able to edit this unless you're editing it as a super user. WeBWorK can take a long time to grade stuff or to generate library pages or something like that. So we increase the timeout pretty significantly. That's a standard number. You can use that. We also have to, and this is going to vary depending on whether you have Apache 2 or Apache 2.4 or Yum or apt or Fedora or CentOS. This actually is pretty different. Somewhere in the appropriate place, we need to add lines which will limit the number of Apache workers or processes that can be run and limit how long those processes are allowed to survive. So in the case of this machine, that is in mods enabled, and then we're going to edit npm prefork, which you'll remember is the version of the prefork thing that we're using. So this is max request workers, 150. That is way too many. That's fine for a web server, which is just serving static web pages. For us, our web pages each involve a lot of work, potentially. The rule of thumb here is something like 5 maybe per gigabyte of system memory or so. 20 is what I use if I'm not sure, but it can really vary. This is what you're going to change if your system starts behaving badly. This is one of the first places you'll look. Max connections per child is how long those services live, how many requests they'll take before they kill themselves and you get a new one, just to sort of keep them cycling and fresh, and we usually set that about 100. Okay, so that is configuring Apache. Apache is currently has the settings that we want. One of the nice things is that we don't have to do a lot of really heavy configuring of Apache. So if you're, running this in a server and your administrator is worried about you really mucking with the system files, we don't necessarily do a lot of that. This is pretty minimal type stuff that we've got going on here. You could ask your sysadmin to do the sudo portions of it. All right, so going back to our list, let's see, what are we doing? We've got a lot of the directory structure set up. We've got all the prerequisites installed, and we're in the middle of configuring those things. And we've sort of configured the Apache modules, and now we want to do the MySQL database. The MySQL database doesn't really need a lot of configuring per se. Its standard settings are fine. What it does need is for us to create the actual database and the user that is going to use the database. So I'm going to log in with MySQL. This is actually logging me into the MySQL user prompt. I'm using the same MySQL root set password that I set earlier. This is we're in a whole new world here. This is not any particular Linux. This is MySQL. So I'm going to create database WeBWorK. That creates, it exists. I already created a WeBWorK database. It's hanging around for whatever reason. Normally I would type this and it would create it. We've already got it, so that's fine. And then I'm going to do a pretty long command that you can see that I've written here. And what I'm doing is I am creating a web user, or a database user, and I'm giving it all of the permissions it could ever want for the WeBWorK database. So it can do whatever it wants, all of those things it can do on the WeBWorK database. And we're going to give this to the user I'm going to call WeBWorK right. That's the name of our MySQL user. And it's at localhost and identified by, and this is going to be a plain text password, which you should set, but should not be your root password, and it shouldn't be your WeBWorK user password either. It shouldn't be www.admin's password, since this password is going to be in plain text in one of the config files. So this is like a semi-secure password. Okay. Normally it would say one row affected, but I'm adding a user which was already there, so don't even worry about it. And that's it. We only need to make the database and make the user that's using the database, and that's all of the MySQL hacking we have to do. However, if you're brave, and not even really brave, if you're willing to tolerate command line stuff, diving into the MySQL database can be useful for seeing what's happening sometimes. Does that user actually exist? What kind of stuff have they been doing? You can do a lot by actually poking around in the database. I just wouldn't mess with stuff. You can look at whatever you like, though. All right. So moving on, again, in no real order, I'm going to add some configuration variables to our www.admin user. This is just going to make using our script tools easier. When you do log in as www.admin, there are various environment variables that should be there, that should be set. So I know I've written down some things here, but I might as well just use Emacs and edit it. I'm going to edit .bashrc. This is controlling what is happening in your environment when you log into Linux, and I'm just going to tack some stuff onto the end of it. We want to add the WeBWorK bin to our path, which will allow us to execute commands directly from the WeBWorK bin without actually having to be there in the same directory. That's useful. When those commands run, when those scripts run, they need to know where everything's located, so we've got a couple of I've got some typos there. I'll try and fix those later. We've got a couple of system level variables that we use. WeBWorK root points to where WeBWorK lives, and PG root, which is what should be written on that page but isn't, points to where PG lives. WeBWorK PG. All right. And then we are going to run source.bashrc. That's actually going to export those things into our environment. So if I do echo WeBWorK root, that variable's available to us, and I can run things in the WeBWorK bin without actually being in the WeBWorK bin. One of your friends, when you're trying to figure out if you've done everything you need to do in a WeBWorK installation, is going to be a little program called checkmodules.pl. If you've done your setup, you can just run this from anywhere, but this guy actually lives in this folder with all of the other scripts that are useful as a system administrator for WeBWorK. If I run check modules, technically it'll ask you if you want Apache 1 or 2. People haven't used Apache 1 in forever, and so I wouldn't worry about that. It's going to run through, and it's looking to see whether you have all of the stuff that you need. This is where we keep our sort of master list of stuff that WeBWorK needs to run. It should be pretty up to date. You can see some double stars next to stuff. That is actually stuff that I'm missing. So whatever scrub pre-made this instance for me and told me that they had installed all the prerequisites was a liar. I don't know. Yeah, it must have been Jason. No, I did. This is a teaching moment, as it's often called in the education system. So this is missing a bunch of stuff. We want to install these things. This is really useful. We'll see a little bit of this when we do the upgrade, or we'll see a lot more of this when we do the session on upgrading. when you do an upgrade and you want to know if you have to install new things to an existing WeBWorK installation, this is how you're going to figure out if you need new things. So for example, I'm looking through here and I see that I need text::CSV as a Perl package. That's a Perl package that I'm missing that I need. There are two ways to get it. I could just do cpan text CSV, but that's really not preferable if I can avoid it. So I'm going to go on Google and I'm going to search up, Ubuntu text::CSV package. Give you guys a chance to have my page refresh. And this is not the 100%, but I'm seeing libtext::CSV Perl. That looks like a pretty good candidate for a package name. If I do apt cache search, which is one way of searching things in apt, I could do text::CSV, and I'm seeing libtext::CSV Perl. So chances are I'm going to do libtext::CSV Perl and install it. So now if I run check modules again, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff missing. So I'm going to have to go through and do some of these other things. But text::CSV is not missing anymore. It's missing its little double stars. I've got that one. So we're going to go through the rest of the list and figure out this stuff. HTML scrubber, so that's another one we're going to have to look at. So I could do apt cache search HTML scrubber. That didn't show up anything, but it's lying to me. It's lying. It's not being very friendly because I happen to know that if I do HTML scrubber and I search for that package, there's a package called libhtml scrubber Perl that happens to be in Ubuntu, and that is absolutely the package we want. So apt cache doesn't always tell you what you need to know. Google doesn't always tell you what you need to know either, and you just kind of do your best to figure out where your packages live. All right, check modules. And we're scrolling up, and we're seeing what else we're missing. I'm seeing array utils. So I don't find array utils with my apt cache search. If I do array utils when I'm looking for the actual package, that's where I'm going with this. There is array util. This actually is not the package we want. So it's a little bit dangerous sometimes. In particular, I don't think this is it might be the package we want. I really don't think it is though, because we don't install it from it normally. Oh, there is no current release for this source package in Ubuntu. So there you go. This package is not something we can get from apt, so we need to install it using cpan. So I would do sudo cpan array utils. And you'll notice it's the same as when I installed iterator earlier. Cpan's going to run, it's going to fetch the package, and it's going to install it, running a bunch of tests. And notice we're just, iterating on this, polishing on it. So we're going to do it again. Check modules. Scrolling up. We see some weird errors coming, but the module is there, and so we just hope those aren't going to cause any real problems. Scrolling up even further. This is where it's actually looking for programs, binaries, that are used by WeBWorK. You'll notice we're missing DVI PNG. Binary type programs have to be gotten using apt or yum. So we have a package, dvi.png, and we need to install it. But I don't necessarily trust that it's the package that I wanted, so I do check modules yet again, and I see that I'm all clean, no double stars. So I think now we finally really do have all of the prerequisites we need in order to get WeBWorK running. Actually, that's not true. I'm lying. There's one more thing we need to check. There's a file in here called check.lit.tech. This is not a binary. You can't run it, but what you can do is you can run pdf check.lit.tech. And what this basically does is just a big LaTeX file that has all of the packages listed that we use in WeBWorK. And if this fails to compile because of a missing package, then that's a package you'll have to install on your system. However, most of the time installing, something like the TextLive extras package will get pretty much everything, although, there's some stuff that you need to get. Oop, PDF is not a full command. So you can see that it's not actually producing anything, but you'll notice all of these style files that it's finding. I mean, these are all the tech things that it's checking to make sure exists, and we need all of them. So I didn't have any trouble, so we must have everything. All right. Let us do a little bit more, and then we'll take a break. This will be sort of the last setting stuff up that we need before we can really dive in to our WeBWorK setup and configuration. You'll notice that our courses file is empty. That makes us sad. There should definitely be stuff in courses. But we don't have a separate distribution for courses. We don't have a separate WeBWorK Git repository for courses. What we have is in WeBWorK 2, you'll notice that there's a file called courses.dist, and it contains a bunch of stuff. These .dist files we'll see come up a couple times throughout the session. Those are distribution versions of things. Those are the versions of those files that come with your distribution, and you're going to need to sort of copy them over to where they should be in order for them to work properly. So courses.dist here, I need to put everything that's in courses.dist into courses. So I'm going to go into courses, and I'm going to copy everything that's in courses.dist back up in WeBWorK here. Except I want to recursively copy so that I get my subdirectories and all of that stuff. So now I do this. This is fine. You can definitely do this. There is sort of an alternative here. One of the problems is that when you do updates, courses is not updated. Courses is very specific to your server. This is where your courses live. So if I do an update in WeBWorK 2 and I get the latest WeBWorK 2 files, I will get the latest versions of courses.dist, and in particular, I will get the latest sort of stuff in model course, sort of the skeleton course that all courses are created from. And those changes won't make it to courses because courses is now unlinked from it. We copied it over, and this version of model course is completely separate from the other one. So what people do sometimes is you can remove model course, and we can link the version of model course that actually lives in courses.dist to model course here. And so now you'll see that model course here is just a link pointing back to that previous one, so any updates I make in WeBWorK 2 now will make it into our courses folder. And that's it. That is largely what we need to do in order to get WeBWorK sort of set up to be configured. I think all of the main files are where they need to be. All of our packages are configured, and all of that stuff is set up.